So here's a game that I initially wanted to do an entire video on, but changed my mind because I didn't think it was interesting enough to dedicate an entire video to. But I still found some things in this game that I really like, and I also think that I could use this game as a vehicle for me to rant about why I think traversal is more important than it gets credit for, disappointment, learning to appreciate a game for what it is, and dated humor. Sunset Overdrive is a game that I've wanted to own ever since I saw its E3 reveal all those years ago. I think partly because I was one of those idiot kids who participated in the console wars, and I thought this would be one of the titles to push Xbox to the top. Same with Scalebound, rest in peace. But also because it just reminded me of a little game that some of you may be tired of me mentioning by now, Jet Set Radio. Unfortunately, I didn't pick it up back then because I was a child without a penny to my name, and I'd rather ask for bigger titles like Grand Theft Auto 5. And by the time the game had been released on PC later, my interest had just about waned on it, so I didn't really care to pick it up. That was all until I saw it was on sale for $4 measly not too long ago. So I bought the game, I played it, I finished it, and I don't really regret putting it off for so long because I don't think I was missing out on anything special here. This is a fun game, but there are also some elements here that I don't think age particularly well. There's also parts of this game that I just find tiring to deal with. Those are the very same parts of this game that makes it feel like a product of its time, and not in a good way. And I find that especially ironic, because when I was researching this game to do a full video on it, I learned that it was born out of a desire to do something fresh and unique. This game was being developed during a time when third-person shooters were still deep in their cover shooter phase. You know exactly the games I'm talking about. Gears of War, Max Payne 3, Spec Ops, anything like that. Sunset Overdrive was created to be an answer to stuff like that. Instead of hunkering down behind a brick wall, you're actually encouraged to expose yourself and build momentum to evade enemies. Standing still means death in most cases. The gameplay is the least of my concerns when it comes to Sunset Overdrive though, because that's what I consider the only good thing about the game. Basically, you're a god. You can clear Sunset City in about a minute, and enemies are nothing more than heads for you to pop as you leap like 20 feet in the air above them. I think this game is a testament to the power of a good traversal system and just how far you can take a gaming experience if you can make getting from point A to point B enjoyable. I was already working with this idea in my mind when I was playing through the Mega Man Legends games not too long ago, and I realized just how fun it was to skate around and do little leaps off of ledges and stuff. You know, when I think back on that game, my mind doesn't immediately go to the characters or the story. It goes back to what I considered one of the best parts of the game, just exploring the islands, getting to see different things. And that experience was just made all the more enjoyable by the fact that I could do what you're seeing on screen right now. I also think back to other games with fun traversal systems, like the Arkham games and Spider-Man, which was also developed by Sunset Overdrive's developers Insomniac Games. And you know, I realize those are games that I like to replay a lot just because it's fun to swing or glide around the city. I think it's nice that Sunset Overdrive has that same thing going for it as well, because that's what made me want to keep coming back to this game. You can grind on rails and swing on posts to get around, which is already fun enough as is, but once you unlock a couple techniques like air dashing to extend your combos, and learn a few tricks like jumping out from an undergrind or an underwater dive to gain crazy heights, then it starts to feel really satisfying playing this game. One of my favorite things to do in this game was chain all these tricks together into a crazy combo from one end of the city to the other, and I always found it disappointing when I had to stop moving to accomplish something in a mission. And on top of just getting around in this game, I thought the shooting was pretty fun as well, which is by no means a surprise for an Insomniac Games game. I think it's pretty clear that they were leaning on their own strings from the Ratchet & Clank series as well. All the weapons felt nice to use, and the basic enemies exploded into a giant mess, which was always fun when you managed to get a bunch of them at once. My favorites were the more realistic weapons though, because it felt more visceral when you killed someone with these. But it was also fun using some of the sillier weapons, like the Roman candle, which shot a bunch of homing fireworks that exploded on contact, or that one weapon you get in that mission where you send out a robotic dog to blow up all of the enemies in a certain radius. The gunplay in this game isn't deep or anything, but I'm pretty sure it's not by design. It's supposed to complement all the freestyling you do through the city by giving you something mindless to do while you really focus on not dropping your combo. And I gotta say, it succeeds there. The one and only other thing I can praise this game for is the mission structure, but that's also where a lot of my problems began. A lot of them took place at these fun locations, and they would change up the gameplay in a way that didn't feel obtrusive or out of place at all. It was more than just shoot this thing over and over and over until it's dead, you know what I mean? But even when you did get stuck with those missions, like the boss fights for instance, I didn't really mind them because they were creative enough. And I didn't even mind the occasional escort mission because the game had you constantly moving. The only types of missions that I really hated and found disengaging were the ones where you had to defend a point of interest for a set amount of time, which was a pretty recurring objective in this game. And I think the reason why I dislike these missions so much is because you're hunkered down to one area most of the time, doing a lot of moving back and forth on the same rail or patrolling the same areas. And that's just not the way I like to play this game. I like zipping around everywhere, not just one area. This also leads into one of my larger problems with Sunset Overdrive. This game is so freaking slow. This game loves to hold your hand, which makes no sense for the kind of game that it is. There's so much in this game that I remember being frustrated by because this game insisted on stopping you so much. In fact, I have a great and frustrating example of this game doing just that. The game stopped me at one point because it wanted to guide me through what amps are. Amps are basically badges that you can add to your character or weapons to change their skills. And I didn't have a huge problem with the game slowing me down there just to give me a quick rundown on that. But then it tells me to go to a parking lot and kill a bunch of enemies so I can use the amps. And after I finished killing the enemies while using the amps, it stops me again to explain how the amps activate, even though the game just taught me what they were and how to use them as I was playing. But the most frustrating part by far was how the tutorial had the nerve to tell me to stay with it because it knows how angry you're getting at the game for stopping you and repeating itself so much. It's mostly the things like that that I had a problem with in Sunset Overdrive. You know, I kept thinking to myself, this should be the kind of game where once it puts its foot on the gas, it doesn't stop. But it's not that kind of game. The dialogue and humor might make some of you want to turn it off as well, because it's abysmal and dated. But as someone who spent their adolescent years on the internet just taking in the most embarrassing content you can probably think of, I gotta say I've seen worse. But I still want to rip it a new one. First of all, for those of you who still don't have any idea what Sunset Overdrive is, this game takes place in not just the apocalypse, but the awesome apocalypse. Insomniac's words, not mine. Every other line or character is a reference to something. We're calling this old guy Walter our dad, even though we only knew the guy for like a day. There's plenty of internet humor here as well, if that's your thing. I will admit that this game did get me to laugh a few times as well, but they were mostly at the jokes where the game poked fun at itself. This is easily the most subjective part of this game, but Sunset Overdrive also prides itself on being fun and zany, so I think the comedy of it all is worth bringing up and it's fair to criticize. This game also does something else that I really hate in writing, which is acknowledging its own faults in a meta way by bringing things up that the player may be annoyed with in the dialogue, but also treating that acknowledgement as a fix to the issue. Like, the developers knew that the mission they designed was bullshit, but because they gave recognition to that fact, then it was okay, and the player just has to deal with it. A good example of what I'm talking about is that amps tutorial I mentioned earlier. The game literally tells you to stick with it because it goes on for so long. There's just so much to this game's writing that drags it down in my opinion, and I don't want to sound entirely dismissive of it, because I swear I gave it an honest chance. I watched all the cutscenes, I played all the DLC, I picked up on its commentary on the dominance corporations have on us socially. But I don't think the message is delivered well with these fourth wall breaks and all this other snarky dialogue. Which is exactly why I think you shouldn't play this game for the story at all. This is one of those you play for the gameplay, not the plot. And with all of that said, I want to answer a question that I ended up asking myself after finishing this game. Did Sunset Overdrive live up to my expectations? And yeah, I think it did. In my mind, this game was just Jet Set Radio or Tony Hawk, but with guns. This stylish platformer that also doubled as a third-person shooter. And the only problem was, it proved to be more annoying than I anticipated. This is the kind of game you're supposed to have mindless fun with. Don't expect anything more from it. For $4, I think I got this game as a steal. I think if I got it for anything 10 or under, then I consider it a steal. I don't think it's underrated or a hidden gem either. It's just another cool game to have in your collection if you feel like picking it up. I'd honestly put this game on the same level as something like Borderlands or Saints Row. The gameplay is fun, but everything surrounding it can be annoying, and the humor doesn't hold up like it did back in the 2010s. If you can find it for $10 or under, then sure, pick it up if you want. But if not, who gives a shit?